When the news broke, I almost dismissed this as a rumor, my friends. Canada, yes Canada, invited to anchor the European Union's massive new defense pact. For a moment it sounded like a bureaucratic typo, but then the reality sank in that Canada has actually stepped into a role that not even Britain could secure. I found myself staring at the announcement, unsure whether to laugh or just appreciate the audacity of it, right? In this video, we're going to cover why this move is more than a headline. It's a sign that the world's alliances are shifting under our feet and that the costs and benefits are still mostly hidden, especially for ordinary people. We'll look at why Europe, in a historic first, turned to Canada over any other country on Earth, how this decision will rewrite Canada's economy, in my opinion, its security and its identity, and what this moment quietly reveals about power, trust, and risk in a new global order. Here's what I want to know from you, especially if you're watching this from Canada. Would you rather see your country tied more closely to Europe or stay anchored to the United States? I mean, do seriously consider this, factoring in geography as well. Does this kind of behind-the-scenes realignment make you feel safer or just uneasy? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. Quick personal note, my book, Awake: The Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Soft Lies, is finally out in the world now. This is not just a guide to thinking more clearly. It's really about finding a sense of clarity and calm in a world that just keeps getting louder. If you ever feel like I do sometimes, a bit worn down by all of the noise and knee-jerk opinions, and you want practical ways to think things through properly, especially under pressure, I think you'll find this really valuable. If you prefer to listen instead of read, I've now added a 24-minute companion podcast that walks you through some of the key ideas in depth. You find all of the links below, along with a launch video that explores the bigger themes. There is a special discount for subscribers as well. So if you're curious, just hit that subscribe button and check it out when you have a moment. And one more tiny extra thing before we dive in. Maybe you didn't know, but I am a computer scientist and I have a PhD in the field. I'm working on a new course all about AI fluency, essentially making sense of the technology that's shaping the next decade. If you're interested in this space and want to help guide what I build, I'd love to have your input. There is a very quick 8-question survey, just a couple of minutes to fill out, and your thoughts will directly influence the content that I build next. The links to everything are down below. It would mean so much to hear from you, but now let's dive in. Now, there is an old cliche that Canada is always the reliable backup, the polite afterthought in global affairs, as if. That's definitely not my opinion. But this time the script was flipped, probably towards the truth. While the UK, a country with centuries of entanglement in European politics, tried and failed to get into the European Union's new Security and Defence Action for Europe's agreement, Canada was actually invited to the front row. SAFE, as the pact is called, isn't just a military handshake, it's actually a 150 billion euros initiative to rearm, modernize, and defend Europe against a world that seems to lurch from one crisis to another. Russia's aggression, the global mood swings, and a collective sense of instability have actually pushed Europe to search for partners it can genuinely trust. And somehow, in a room full of countries, Canada got the nod. Now, if you're surprised, you're not alone. I've spent years watching these alliances shift, but even I was caught a little bit off guard, although pleasantly surprised. And to think clearly here, we really have to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Canada is both a minor player in the world stage, a middle power, but when stability is scarce, suddenly the most valuable friend in the room as well. So why Canada? What made this unassuming country the only non-EU state ever invited into Europe's defense corps? Well, first, there's the reliability factor. In a world where political winds change directions with every single election, or weekends in some countries, Europe wanted a supplier who wouldn't suddenly pull up the drawbridge or turn defense contracts into bargaining chips. Canada's foreign policy, for all of its flaws, has a reputation for steadiness. No sharp pivots, no sudden feuds. Second, Canada's quietly become a powerhouse in certain defense technologies. It's not just maple syrup and peacekeeping. Behind the scenes, Canadian companies are leading in drone systems, advanced steel, robotics, radar, and next-generation armored vehicles. And these are not just exports, they're actually lifelines for a continent suddenly a little more conscious of its own vulnerabilities. And third, this is the part that I find most revealing personally, both Canada and Europe want to diversify away from old dependencies. Europe is still haunted by the reality that the US, no matter how close the alliance, isn't always predictable. And Canada, maybe more quietly, is also learning the same lesson. This deal gives each side what the other wants: reliable, strategic distance. And there is some wisdom in this, right? But also a certain loneliness. When your old alliance is fray, who do you trust next? Who do you become? The opportunities for Canadian business here are enormous. Billions in new contracts, a sudden inflow of foreign investment, whole industries, steel, aerospace, engineering, are set to boom. And that's the part that you'll see in the evening news as well. But if you look a little bit deeper, the questions start piling up. Reporters tried with little success to get Canadian officials to reveal the price tag. Is it hundreds of millions or billions? No clear answer. We'll have more to say in due course, said one minister, as if the cost was just a footnote. And that's fair enough. Maybe the details are not ironed out yet. But meanwhile, the UK reportedly walked away when asked to pay £6 billion interest fee. Canada was accepted, but the terms are still being finalized, and not everyone at the table seems to know what those terms actually are. And there is a certain kind of pattern here as well. The biggest moves often happen in the smallest print. The truth is, nobody really knows yet what this new status will actually cost, not just in money, but in strategic risk and dependencies, and in the subtle reshaping of national priorities. It's the kind of issue that punishes emotional thinking, but also punishes apathy. So what exactly is changing here? Well, at first glance, it's a transaction. Europe now has a long-term reliable supplier outside of US control, and that means the EU can modernize, arm up, and perhaps most importantly, feel less exposed to the mood swings of Washington. For Canada, the door swings open to $244 billion procurement markets, with over $1 trillion in opportunities over the next decade. On paper, it's about deals, contracts, factories, but look a little deeper, and the ground shifts beneath your feet as well. This is a realignment, one that goes beyond business. It's a change in how Canada sees itself and how others might begin to see Canada too, not just as a polite bystander to the old order, but as a front and center player in the emerging architecture of the next one. Now, this year's G20 meeting was actually a mirror for this moment, right? Most of the world's population, GDP, and trade were at the table, but not with the United States in the center chair. The old anchors are now drifting, even if they haven't fully broken free. Europe is actually making contingency plans for a future where America isn't always the sun around which everyone else orbits. And Canada, maybe for the first time in modern history, is hedging its bets, looking for a seat at a second table. That's actually the practical side, but the symbolism of this is sharper. SAFE is not EU membership. We have another video on that. Not on paper, not yet. But it places Canada closer to the core of Europe's decision-making than any other outsider has ever been. There are already officials off the record talking about North Atlantic integration and the possibility of a broader EU-Canada alignment. Is it really so far-fetched to imagine a future where Canada is, if not in the European Union, then at least a semi-permanent fixture within its economic and defense structures? Stranger things have happened, right? And in geopolitics, what starts as temporary often might just become the new normal. If you want to get really speculative, consider this. As Europe looks for allies that it can trust, and as Canada tires of being taken for granted by its southern neighbor, the incentives for even closer integration will only grow, my friends. The obstacles are massive: geography, legal systems, the weight of history. But so is the idea once of a military pact spanning 2 continents. The invitation to SAFE is not a wedding ring, but it is a key, one that unlocks new rooms Canada was never even supposed to enter at some point. Some will call it a betrayal of the old alliances. Others will call it a sign of long overdue maturity. And in my personal view, it's a kind of necessary disillusionment, a quiet acceptance that the world isn't just getting smaller, it's getting stranger, more fragmented, more open to radical possibilities. Canada has chosen to plant its flag in new territory, to step outside the lines drawn for it by past generations. The real question isn't whether this is bold or prudent. It's whether Canada understands the storms that come with drawing a new map, and whether it's ready to hold its ground when the weather turns. By the way, if you're enjoying it, I'd really love you to subscribe. The House of L is a community of thoughtful, curious people, and you're always very welcome here. Some shifts are so subtle, my friends, you only notice them in the rearview mirror. But every once in a while, a country makes a move that's both a risk and an invitation, a declaration that it refuses to be trapped by the choices of yesterday. Canada's entry into SAFE is one of those moments. It's not just an economic opportunity or a diplomatic badge. It's a signal that the map is changing, that trust, stability, and independence have become rarer than ever, and that the nations who find new ways to build them will actually quietly rewrite the future. Earlier, I asked whether you felt safer or more uneasy about this new direction. If I'm perfectly honest, I feel both. Because to see the world clearly is to recognize the weight of choices made in quiet rooms and the uncertainty that always follows. But I do believe this. History belongs to the countries willing to risk something for their independence, even if the rest of us are left watching a little bit awestruck from the outside. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, if you want to understand how to navigate the noise, the hype, and the complexity of our current moment, I think you'd really enjoy my book. It's called Awake, the Practice of Critical Thinking in an Age of Self-Lies, and it's written for people who want to stay grounded, think clearly, and live in reality even when the world makes that feel impossible. I've also now included a 24-minute podcast episode where we unpack some of the ideas behind Awake in a more relaxed, conversational way, perfect if you prefer to listen while walking, driving, or just taking a break from screens. You'll find the link down below. I'd love to know what you think of all of it. Thank you so much for being here, for your curiosity, and for holding on to the kind of clear thinking that in the end is going to save us all. If you like this conversation, consider subscribing for more, and don't forget to check out these other videos that I've linked here as a natural next step for a deeper dive. Until next time, stay awake and take care.